things I want to refer to. Let's give some background to this. As you know, I'm from the UK, so I come to America sometimes with the outsider's eye on certain issues. And I was as a spectator at a business leaders conference last year, where a CEO of a company was asked by a member of the audience what his company was doing to address environmental concerns. And he really shot the questioner down by suggesting that she was a sort of raving lefty anarchist to even ask such a question. I was a bit surprised by that. Even more surprised when half of the audience gave him a very big clap. And they were all CEOs and business leaders from America. This was in Utah. It's got me thinking. And there are all sorts of things which Shannon, who I'll introduce shortly, is much better qualified to address than I am. But I just thought there may be 2 points I could make that look at maybe some of the deep cultural roots of the attitude that some people here in the US have. And one of them is perhaps biblical in the sense that America's founding is much more associated with the notion of a promised land and a people coming to a new place and being given a gift of fertile soil and endless resources, etc. That's, in my view, so deep in the American psyche, and it has some wonderful results. Part of that is perhaps down to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, which, as I'm sure many of you know, says, "And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth," etc., etc. The idea of man having dominion over the earth, and us being, us sort of deserving this gift we've been given in the wonderful lands of America. There's an interesting book that's come out by Margaret Barker called Creation, A Biblical Vision for the Environment, published by T&T last year. And she argues that there's a misunderstanding. The word dominion does not mean ruling in the sense of an unjust tyrant, but rather it's the careful stewardship of a good king. She said the natural world is to be ruled by humanity as a nation is ruled by a good monarch, which in the ancient world meant with justice, care and concern. So all I want to say is that the Bible doesn't perhaps give us reason to think that we can exploit our resources quite to the extent some people might believe. And the second thing is that if you go back actually to the founding principles of this nation, and the founding fathers, they had a very strong sense of what we now today would call environmental stewardship. And many of you might remember Andrea Wolf coming to Charleston. She spoke at Middleton Place. She's a German historian and horticultural historian. And she's written 2 books, The Founding Gardeners and The Brother Gardeners. The Founding Gardeners looks at founding fathers of America and determines that they were all, first and foremost, small-holding gardeners and farmers and all of this. There's one particularly interesting thing which she drew my attention to, which is that James Madison actually expressed a belief in the need to look after our planet with great vivid articulacy in 1818 in an address to the Agricultural Society of Albemarle, Virginia, where he said, and I just will quote a tiny bit of it, so this is at a time where America seems to be endless, where if you ran out of land you could just move, etc. And he says, although no determinate limit presents itself to the increase of food and to a population commensurate with it, other than the limited productiveness of the earth itself, we can scarcely be warranted in supposing that all the productive powers of its surface, the Earth's surface, can be made subservient to the use of man, in exclusion of all the plants and animals not entering into his stock of subsistence. He goes on to say, the supposition cannot well be reconciled with that symmetry in the face of nature, which derives new beauty from every insight that can be gained into it. It is forbidden also by the principles and laws which operate in various departments of her economy, falling within the scope of common observation as well as within that of philosophic researchers. And he goes on to sort of say that there are thousands and thousands of species on this planet, and such a small proportion were intended for our use, and therefore how can we imagine that we can, turn everything towards our own ends when clearly that's not what God intended. And so, not to go too far down that track, but I just think that's sort of interesting, maybe little twists on some commonly held beliefs. Anyway, on to Shannon, who, by the way, has such an encyclopedic knowledge of this entire topic that I'm really looking forward to his talk and also looking forward to your questions. I have no doubt that he'll be able to give fantastic answers to all of them. You all have a potted biography on your chairs, but to add a few things. So Shannon studied philosophy and economics at Wheaton College, and also French literature and language at the University of Lille in France, and did his MBA at the University of Virginia. He went on to become a major investor, as is set out there, and has lately moved into particularly renewable energy investment, founding Abundant Capital Partners. And very exciting news is that just a couple of days ago, it was announced that Shannon's company, Abundant Power, had invested 100 million, or had agreed to commit 100 million to President Obama's new Better Building Challenge, which is a public-private partnership intended to improve energy efficiency in public and private buildings, and will create jobs, save energy, and all sorts of other things. It's a very exciting announcement, and I think Shannon's role in that whole program was probably understated in the press. So I'm very, very excited to have him here today. Last night I discovered that he has a lighter side to his character, including being the inventor of a lot of very entertaining games as a sports instructor at Club Med back in the day. But I couldn't think of a way to line that into his bio in a sensible way, so I thought I'd leave it out. Anyway, thanks very much for coming, Shannon.
Okay, with that, I appreciate it very much. That little skeleton in my closet, but it was a lot of fun to be a sports instructor at Club Med. Thank you everyone for having me here, Carolyn and Ian. This is a great building. I've been down King Street many times in my life. I've always wondered what goes on in this building, so here I am today. I wanted to start off just quickly with two comments. First is, maybe many of you saw in the news on Monday or Tuesday that global carbon emissions increased to the all-time high, 5.9% increase, the highest level in human history today on our planet. The U.S. growth was 4.1%, so a little bit less than the rest of the world. Because everybody wants to be like us, there's more and more people consuming like us. So it creates an issue. If there is a question in this room on either side of the party, we'll soon know about the impact of global climate change and the rapidity of it. And in fact, most people argue we're seeing it already. The other thing I wanted to do before I get into some of the nitty-gritty is read a quote. And I guess that's okay. We'll have a conversation here. Let me just read this to you. By increasing our American energy supply and decreasing the long-term demand for oil, we'll be well positioned to address the challenge of climate change and continue our long-standing responsibility for stewardship over the environment. That was not an excerpt from an address from an environmentalist, nor was it an excerpt from a speech by President Obama. That is taken word for word out of the 2008 Republican Party plank and is currently on their website today. When Carolyn asked me to come and talk about why climate change is not a left-wing issue, I felt like it would be important to describe the context that I see today that is political. You can't take the politics out of it. But how one can get to a place where we might have a consensus around climate change a consensus around energy policy in the U.S. So let me first tell you a little bit about my background. Carolyn got all of it right. The only thing she doesn't have right, or didn't have wrong, or didn't tell you about, is the fact that I am from South Carolina. I grew up here. I am a Irmo High School graduate, and to the Clemson fans in the room, I am a South Carolina Gamecock fan, and have been all my life. Go to Williams Rice, there's your game. I'm proud to be from South Carolina. My studies in France were as a Rotary Scholar from South Carolina. I spent my freshman year in college the entire summer working for Fritz Hollings, and do a lot of work currently with Lindsey Graham. So like a true Southern person, I am aligned with both Democratic and Republican Party values at some level. I want to tell you a little bit about why I entered the energy field. First and foremost, I have two sets of twins. And I spent my entire life making a lot of money for others. And I went through a season where I said, is there something I can do where I can take the skills that I have and repurpose them to make a difference for them versus just a difference for me or make other people wealthy? I wanted to find something missional. I wanted to find something that was associated with growth. So I looked around and settled in on this space. One of the seminal books that changed my thinking about the environment was a book about William McDonough called Cradle to Cradle. I don't know if any of you read that book or not. We opened up Abundant Power 3 years ago, Abundant Power Group. The purpose of Abundant Power Group is to scale the clean energy economy. We want to do that with financial services and products, provide the blood to the clean energy economy to help it grow. We are dedicated to be a commercial voice in the public square. And I'll tell you more about that later, why that's so important. We have 3 divisions currently. One is Abundant Power Capital, which you made reference to, which is a private equity group investing in growing businesses that are post-venture capital, helping the winners win, and continuing to develop and grow in our country, providing the necessary capital to get more customers, expand their staff, hire people, open up new plants. We have a division called Abundant Power Solutions, which is focused on energy efficiency finance, which is a very important area, and what you saw in the headlines, that division made a commitment and one of the founding partners of a joint effort by the White House and the private sector to increase energy efficiency in our country. The third thing we do is called Abundant Power Communities, and that division is helping municipalities, school districts attain their sustainability goals. So we have 3 dedicated teams all working to find ways where we see there needs to be talent applied to solve important problems around scaling the clean energy economy. One of the divisions that no one knows about, it's mentioned on our website, it's the one I hope to run when I retire, and I hope it will become our largest division, is our foundation, Abundant Hope. And Abundant Hope is to provide donations and capacity building grants to institutions around the world providing clean energy to areas off the grid, areas of energy poverty. And we are proud to say we made our first grant to E&Co recently to help them expand their efforts with energy entrepreneurs in third world countries. So we're an interesting company. We could only do it in Charlotte, because we take people who are from the financial service industry and repurpose them towards solving these problems. We also were very involved in helping design a residential energy efficiency project here in Charleston. We have turned that into one of the first in the country qualified energy conservation bond financings for commercial buildings. So we're very involved even here in this community. But the last thing y'all need to know about me, and you may have already picked this up, is I'm a Republican. And I very much believe that climate change is one of the most important issues facing our country today. And to those of you in the audience who may not be on my side of the aisle, provide you some context through which a more constructive dialogue can go on politically to create a better fabric, a better tapestry. We can address this issue more as Americans, not as partisans. My belief is that this issue should resemble national security. It should be something we have broad agreement around 80% of what we're doing as a country, and this squabble and fight over the other 20 as we are prone to do as Americans. I was with Lindsey Graham in Charlotte the day that he got a call from the senior staff person telling him that Harry Reid sold him out, and Obama didn't back him up to keep climate change at the top of the agenda and instead put immigration ahead of him. This is after Senator Graham went to the White House and said, I will be willing to take a stand on this issue, but you've got to support me. He threw his cell phone across the room I was in and said some unspeakable words, repeated words, although we may have said a few of those last night, I don't remember. But he, afterwards I looked at him and I said, you know, Senator, my purpose, I think one of my purposes in life is to help the Republican Party get on the right side of this issue. And he looked at me and said, good luck. He is I admire him for his bravery and also admire him for his intellect, and he also is very realistic about the challenges ahead for the Republican Party. I'm going to read you some statistics quickly. Reuters poll found that in America, over the last 3 years, people who believe in the Earth has been warming has grown to 83% from 75%. 60% of Americans believe we have to address greenhouse gas emissions regardless of what other countries do. This is from the Yale Project on Climate Change, which interviewed equal amount of Republicans and Independents and Democrats. 78% support more R&D in renewables. A large plurality, and I'm remembering over 70% support a carbon tax. 47% of Americans place global warming as a high priority for our nation. So almost a plurality. 63% of those polled by the Yale Project believe that we should protect the environment even if it reduces economic growth. 64% of Americans also support offshore drilling. And when asked about fossil fuel subsidies, 70% of Americans oppose it, 90% independents. Now, when I look at those statistics and think about politics and think about consensus, as you may have heard the expression, there's a pony in there for America to behave a little bit more like the United Kingdom. But here's the expectations that I want to set for you. There are huge economic and political implications to any kind of consensus. Energy transitions take time. The best estimates are that successful energy transitions for cultures will take 100 years. 100 years. And let's not forget, on both sides of the aisle, we have not in my backyard. When it comes to changing energy consumption, changing your own way of life, no party position is innocent on not doing it themselves, or not wanting it in their own backyard. That is what I think some of the core issues are as I sit here, both as a business person and as a human in this country and as a citizen, thinking about what's going to cause this country to change. Why is it going to be a left-wing issue? Not a left-wing issue. Now, I want to just, without getting into detail, I want to just sketch out, and then you guys will recognize this a little bit, the borders of the issues. Where Republicans have the hardest time embracing what might be, I think, the more international, as Durban is going on right now, the climate talks. Why there's no senior U.S. official at those talks. Why the Republicans are not supportive of those talks. I'm not going to try to defend these, but I'm going to tell you where they are. Republicans do not believe in the extent of man's impact versus other forces. There was a recent study done by the Berkeley Earth Project, which many people heard about. It was partially funded in part by the Koch brothers, one of the large, evil Republican right-wing extreme funders. And They took a scientist who was quite skeptical about global warming, and they commissioned a study. And it's already available, open architecture, ready to be reviewed, and they will have a peer review as well. Despite the fact that the study came back and said there is global warming, and in fact this climate skeptic, Dr. Richard Mueller, believes there's global warming, the study did not address man's impact on that. What it did address is the statistical issues, decadal variations, station quality, urban heat centers, okay, and statistical methodology. There's still an open debate, even with certain scientists, around the impact man has had on this, despite the science. And Republicans sit on top of that issue and are concerned about it. Secondly, there's a debate about the rate of change of global warming. What is that rate, and how will it impact us? And then thirdly, and most importantly, the edge of the debate in the Republican Party is around the types of solutions necessary. Are large governmental-driven solutions really going to be the fastest way to change our society, or individual market-driven solutions? And if we go with a larger government solution, is the curse worse than the disease? There's been a lot of modeling, including by the UN, on even the most effective possible type of governmental regime may only, in order to mitigate future costs of global warming, may cost up to 6% of the gross domestic product today, and may ultimately save us on a net basis less than 0.2%. Now, I don't know. I don't know how they model things like that. I don't even understand half that. But just to understand, these are folks that are really looking at this issue. And I would say that in the Republican circles I run in, those are the three things that I end up seeing more than anything. And that leads to why there's a difficulty in reaching consensus. What causes that resistance? What is leading to, even if you want to debate that, there's an inherent resistance to agreement. There's some real concerns around market response readiness. You know, are the types of technologies that we need today available in the marketplace without subsidy to make the changes that are necessary? And is the playing field level? Is the playing field level? Is the playing field level for all sources of energy? Are we creating rules that energize, pardon the expression, fossil fuel consumption? Do we have the right kind of rules in place? An important point is, are scientists and environmentalists too vocal? That's a real big sticking point for Republicans. I'm going to get to some of the building blocks necessary to move forward, but that is a big issue. I happen to have a ski buddy who's in the news a lot, and you may have seen her on TV. Her name's Ann Coulter. And one night, after a day of skiing and a hot tub and a big pasta dinner and about 4 bottles of wine, I had finally got her to capitulate that global warming is an issue. And she sees the point. And I'll tell you how I got her there in a minute. But I said, well, Ann, you know, you've come out and you've written some stuff about being pro-gay. You know, you can shift the Republican Party if you take a stand. She goes, you know something, the left-wing environmentalists have just controlled this issue for so long. It's just difficult to enter into. Now, I'm not going to comment on whether or not I think that's very brave or courageous, and I do think Ann's brave and courageous in some ways. But she does have a good point. And one of the important roles I think I have to play as a Republican is getting the business voice forward. That's why I said earlier, one of the important parts of abundant power is to be a commercial voice in the public square. The last piece, while you don't see Republicans jumping on this issue enough, is there's no political upside. There's no political upside. There's no PACs out there that reward Republicans. There's no organizations, really strong organizations in the Republican Party that support politicians in our party. Just ask the South Carolina, senior South Carolina senator. The only person that came and supported him after he made some of the stands he did with Kerry and Lieberman, was the Center for American Progress, which is a Democratic think tank. And he had to kindly ask him to stop advertising for him in South Carolina. So I find humorous. So I want to turn to the type of language that I think can resonate with Republicans and can resonate potentially with Democrats. As I tell my friends, I am always around members of the other party. I have been surprised in this last few years how much I have in common around this core issue with the Democratic Party and how many core issues we see so similarly. And at the end of the day, my belief is that climate change will become a Republican issue because it's, by definition, a more inherent Republican issue. And when it does happen, we'll have the most significant policy changes that we could expect from our country, and it will be owned by the Republican Party. It's in the heritage of the Republican Party. It's actually in the heritage of the Republican mindset, except for one little thing. We have members of our party who don't believe in science. Don't ask me why. But there are many, many who do. And I'm going to give a couple of examples. The core area for agreement on global climate change between both parties is national security. National security, national energy security. There was a big report in 2006, the CNA studied wrote a report called National Security and the Threat of Climate Change. Staffed by 3- and 4-star journals, addressed it as one of the most significant issues out there. Even if, and what's going to happen is with the impact of climate change, if, as I said at the very beginning, if global carbon emissions are the highest they've ever been in human history, this is going to be an issue. You cannot argue with the implications of that report. They are very real. And when that happens, as that begins to happen, it will dominate Republican debates. It will dominate Republican debates. Frank Luntz, who was a pollster for Newt Gingrich, now is an independent pollster. I was at a conference recently where he spoke on a lot of issues, including predicting that Herman Cain will resign from this bid for the White House. And this was, 4 weeks ago before any of this hit the fan. Said that in his polling, Republicans and Democrats agree that national security is a top reason to enact comprehensive climate policy. His polling indicates that national security crosses demographic lines, is embraced by opinion elites, and doesn't require belief in climate change. Pitted against economic and environmental arguments, national security was consistently the highest priority. So, you have to think of it in those terms. 59% of our national deficit is generated by oil imports. Our addiction to a substance that is depleting, pollutes our air, and is controlled in part by regimes hostile to our national interests, is not on my personal business plan for my country. It needs to be off that business plan. We need to have a better strategy. And I think many people can think of it that way in Republican circles. Another real important piece of this argument is around conservation. We had a robust discussion last night about the importance of conservation to the conservative mindset. I'd like to read you another quote. What is conservative after all but one who conserves? One who is committed to protecting and holding those things by which we live. We want to protect and conserve the land on which we live, our countryside, our rivers, our mountains, our plains, our meadows and forests. This is our patrimony. This is what we leave to our children. And our great moral responsibility is to leave it to them either as we found it or better than we found it. And that's from Ronald Reagan in 1984. Very difficult to argue with conserving. And there is no arguments around the impact of fossil fuels and polluting. So even if you are having a hard time getting through to Republicans who don't believe in some of those issues I mentioned, this is a good argument to stand on. Global responsibility and leadership is another one. And as Carolyn knows, the world is out there looking at our country and scratching their heads. And I know they do that in a lot of things. But the impact of global responsibility and leadership is important. Let me read you yet another quote that may surprise you. For decades, we've been living lives of abundance, with little regards to our natural resources or global health. But we are now facing hard choices in our energy policy. Future generations, my children and grandchildren, long yours, will have to live with the decisions we make today. And so it is time for us to make some tough and hopefully smart choices regarding our energy use and production before it's too late. That was an address given to Congress by John McCain. Leadership, global leadership, and responsibility resonates in Republican circles. The last one, which I don't really have a lot to say, but I do think it's important, and I have seen it have traction, is insurance policy. We're willing to do a lot of things that we don't have complete certainty about. We're willing to take our country to the edge of war with Iran because we think they have potentially a nuclear bomb. Why not be cautious? Why not hedge our bets? So let me move on and say that those are some tools for those of you who may be Democrats to have a constructive conversation with Republicans about climate change and begin to have statistics at your fingertips and concepts that bridge gaps. And I think these are going to be the fabric by which I will achieve my goal, which is helping the Republican Party get on the right side of this issue. One thing Carolyn asked me to speak to is renewable energy and what might be possible there. I just want to say one brief thing. This came up at dinner last night. I think that there's a real important opportunity for our country to have a grand compromise around nuclear energy and renewable energy. The underlying needs of both industries are very similar. And regardless of your thoughts of nuclear energy, it is a very compelling technology. We have over 100,000 sailors and countless, if you want to add those who've served since the mid-50s, who've lived on top of small nuclears without accident. There's never been a nuclear accident or injury in the United States, including Green Island. We have the most advanced nuclear technology in the world today. Even if you're concerned about nuclear, it might be a compromise worth making to have other people lean into an argument about climate change. That's my argument when I'm with Democrats who say, you know, why don't you believe in global warming? Why don't you talk about that? And I say, well, why don't you talk about nuclear energy? And have an intelligent debate about it. And we'll do the opposite. We'll have an intelligent debate about global warming. Possible compromise, I think, is there. I saw it recently in a remarks made by Senator Alexander of Tennessee, who got up and went on about how he didn't want to pick winners and didn't like Solyndra. And they turned around and said, we know, but we need to have loans to nuclear. We've got to help nuclear. And I said, well, what's the difference between those winners and your winners? So the underlying fabric is there for compromise. Our politicians are going to bungle it, but the kernels are there for potential compromise where we can have a national policy. And let's have a race to the top. So that's one of my ideas, and it has traction. There's been a number of discussions about it in some circles I'll talk about in a minute. So let me end up by talking about the building blocks of what's going to require the Republican Party and both parties to come together and have a meaningful discussion about global climate change and some of these issues. A little bit about some structures that need to happen. We need to have an organization that is supported by clean energy businesses and creates a strong voice. Coal and oil and gas came to Washington, D.C. in the late 1800s, and they haven't left. They've been there for 100 years, lobbying, getting their way, and exactly what they're doing. There is no comparable organization for clean energy. None. Well, we're creating one. It's called the Advanced Energy Economy, and it is taking over what was known as the Clean Economy Network. It's been well funded and it's growing. We also have a PAC called Clean PAC, which I co-chair with a pretty renowned environmentalist activist by the name of Amy Christensen, who will support both Republicans and Democrats in leaning into the issue, providing that political upside that's not available today in the marketplace from a neutral source, business-supported source. One of the policy issues that's going to happen is you're going to see a coalescing around R&D. I didn't mention that earlier in some of the things that Republicans could agree on with Democrats, but that is a consensus issue, and you're going to see what's known as a Manhattan Project for renewable energy. Senator Graham went with a couple of other U.S. senators and a couple of sort of political think tank types to the United Kingdom back in March. And he went there for the purpose of meeting with the conservative leadership of the Tory party. What's that what you call them, Tories?
Tories or Conservatives.
Conservatives. And the point of it all was to understand how they've embraced this issue and how could they get there politically. Two key points, two observations that he relayed to me. One is that the Conservative Party of England was able to move to that place in the United Kingdom because the businesses were speaking. So that was key. And they were able to move to that place because of their electoral system. Well, one of the key issues for that is they have individual parties and they don't quite have, they can put coalitions together. We have two parties. One thing that's not available in the Republican Party today is a solid top-down think tank or PAC or PAC-related group focusing on environmental issues. And that's something there's a number of Republicans today working to create that. There's an existing organization called Republicans for Environmental Protection, and that organization has not proven to be that effective. I would encourage you to look at their website. The other building block, which I could also put into language issues, is an issue near and dear to my heart, is energy efficiency. Buildings today, well, first of all, energy efficiency is the cheapest resource we have, and buildings today emit more greenhouse gas emissions than cars. It's low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can do without any argument, subsidy, or political issue. That's one of the reasons why I participated with Obama and Bill Clinton on the Better Buildings Challenge being sponsored by the Department of Energy. So there's a real building block there, a non-controversial issue that's available to us. And the last one, which I think you're going to see, is level playing field. New rules, tax reform changes, and ongoing policies that create rules that allow the private market to be unleashed. You may or may not know this, but more private market capital moves in one day in the world than all government capital in a year. The private market is so much more powerful if it's unleashed and focused properly. And there's a growing consensus to set the rules up there. So I think there's some real building blocks for Republicans and for policy to move this debate into a place where we can have a lot more agreement, and also not necessarily debate all the nuances of climate change. It's a very difficult issue to get your hand around. Energy is a difficult issue to get your hand around. There's also strong support for utility reform and creating new models for utilities to have incentive-based programs for consumers to create competition. So I would just want to offer up hope that there are things that are happening out there. There's leadership councils, there's energy security councils. There are people on both sides of the party that are both parties moving together. I'll read you one last quote. You can be totally committed to conservative principles, to individual liberty, a market economy, entrepreneurship, and lower taxes, and still be a green conservative. You can believe that with the sound use of science and technology and the right incentives to encourage entrepreneurs, conservatism can provide a better solution for the health of our planet. And that was Newt Gingrich in 2007. So there's an opportunity out there for this to be an American issue. There's language out there for this to be an American issue. The stakes are high. There's a lot of dollars on the table. There's changing our lifestyles on the table. But I think we can do it. And despite the media, which I think we all are victims of at some point, there is the fabric, the tapestry there for this to be a bipartisan issue. That's what my company's dedicated to doing. That's what I'm dedicated to doing for my 2 sets of twins. So for that, I'm done, and I'm happy to entertain some questions.
I'm hopeful that you might be able to assist us here. We have a problem that seems to be, we can cross over the aisle, not Republican and Democrat, but pro-cruise and non-cruise. I don't know how aware you are of the limit, and I don't want to go through it, and no one wants to hear it, but I think one issue is pollution. There is a simple solution if the SPA would listen to it, and that is plug-in shore power. They burn bunker fuel. Ask any resident that lives near the area. You breathe it, comes in through the store windows. It's more expensive than plug-in power. If you have wonderful connections and can put pressure to bear on the SPA to consider adding plug-in power to their $34 million new building, you'd have a lot of people very, very...
Well, I do, have advocacy roles. I don't always focus on every advocacy role. I will say there is an organization called the Carbon War Room, which is founded by Richard Branson and Jigger Shaw, who's the founder of Sun Edison. And one of their big theaters of war is the whole shipping industry and how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions there. And they may be a good advocate for your cause. And I can give you some contact information. It's called the Carbon War Room. They're very effective around dealing with shipping issue pollution. And I mentioned earlier, pollution is an important piece of all this. I don't think there's any debate about the burning of fossil fuels and pollution and what it does to our air. One other thing I would just say, and the reason why I started out with some statistics, to be really crass, politics is about votes, right? And it's about what people perceive and where people are going. And one of the things I truly believe in, and statistics are supporting it, is the youth today are being imprinted with environmentalism. And you may know, what your own personal experiences, and you sit down with a 21-year-old or an 18-year-old, in my case a 12-year-old, and their perspective is a whole lot different than mine. They're all made to recycle, they're all made to throw things away, they're all made to turn off the lights. I think there is a new generation of Americans that's going to be more broadly environmentalists, and that's one reason why I think the Republican Party will shift. It will shift. Yes?
I was reading in the paper this morning that China now emits 23% of the world carbon emissions, and I think we're at 19%. I could have those numbers wrong, but and the Kyoto Protocol is coming up for renewal in 2012. And as you've said, all of this takes a long time for change. But when you were talking about the platform of issues on which both parties can agree, you talked about global leadership. I mean, is that something that is even on the radar, or is that just in terms of the Kyoto Protocol, or is it sort of a moot point because it's just not going to happen?
Yeah, I think right now it is a moot point, yes. So I think nothing's going to happen of significance in the U.S. Senate. The Senate Environmental Policy has passed 61 bills, but we've been all hung up on 15 have gotten approved by the whole. And then, of course, the House has got fairly dysfunctional. Everything is drowned out right now. There's nobody in Washington having discussions about climate change right now. Nobody. It's not happening. Yes.
I have two quick questions. Unless I missed it, you had said that you had gotten Ann Coulter to change your mind and tell us how you did that. But I don't recall hearing the answer. The perception that Republicans are not in favor or don't believe in the man-made pollution. Has a Republican like Sarah Palin, whose state maybe would be impacted more than other states, what's her position, if you know?
No, I don't know Sarah Palin's position, so I can dispense with that.
Okay.
She's a populist and she's a soundbite-oriented politician, so she knows what she might say. It probably would not be something I'd agree with. Ann Coulter, I did answer the question, but I didn't connect the dots in the way I spoke about it. But her issue was, if you could get more businesses talking about this, which is exactly what the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom said, it'd be a lot easier for Republicans to get behind it. And there's no strong Republican voice. And there's been a book written about the whole Waxman Markey climate change legislative debate, and one of the real sightings of affairs is the lead was taken by the environmentalist community versus the business community in terms of how the debate was shaped. And America ultimately, whether we like it or not, as idealists want to be, is shaped by the free market interest of the people that live here. And so I think that will be what will get Republicans over. That's what got the Conservative Party in Great Britain over, and I think that's what will bring the Republicans over. A stronger, cohesive, compelling business voice in the public square. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Do you think there's a need is there a need for it, and is there a way of creating unity on the issue of people changing their personal consumption? And you talked about more efficient housing. What about changes in behaviour? Do you think we have to shelve that issue because it just will never fly with very strong right-wingers? Or
I don't know how much personal regulation. I mean, the closest we've got, I think that's the most effective are CAFE standards on emissions of cars. That seems to be an effective policy, sort of top-down. I think what's going to change behavior, and you see it when the gas prices rise, we're going to see it very soon in utility bill rates. We're going to see it very soon. I mean, if you think about it, I live in a neighborhood, in Charlotte that about 10 years ago, without one government incentive, without one commercial, 70% of the kitchens in that neighborhood were recovered in chlorine. Chlorine. It was the thing to do. There was a market. People were interested in it. The product was priced. It was a value proposition. I mean, that's how markets work. That's where you have one of the things people get into is, well, not all the prices are at the pump. Not all the prices are at the socket. There's an estimate that if you assume that the sixth fleet, I always get mixed up, 6 fleets at Taiwan, I think it's the 7th fleet that's in the Gulf of Kuwait. If you took the cost of that, operation of that entire fleet for a year, and put it at the pump, it would increase America's cost per gallon by $4. That's an embedded cost. Now, every time I make that argument with some of my Republican friends, they go, well, they do more than that. Our job as a world power is to ensure safe seaways. Well, there's one reason why that fleet's over there.
Since you do seem to believe in science, help me understand the news today that in the foreseeable future, natural gas will replace coal in energy production. Good news or bad news?
I think it's good news for our country.
On the surface, I would think so too, but I don't know in terms of the production of natural gas and the methods involved there.
I don't think the broad aspect of American people are going to want to just switch off fossil fuels tomorrow because of a big, expensive model being run by the United Nations. I think we're going to move slowly toward cleaner fuels and then to clean fuels. And the finding of the large resources of natural gas, the Keystone Pipeline in Canada, are very important to our energy national security. And we will move in that direction pretty quickly, I think. It's already impacting world markets. I was in a board meeting today where there was a whole big discussion about moving the entire trucking fleet to natural gas. It's so much cheaper than oil. So much cheaper. It's going to be phenomenal for our country.
the Republicans need to get Boone Pickens to run.
Well, there are issues with it. I mean, I'm on the Board of Environmental Defense Fund, and I have real issues around fracking. But we can get that done. I mean, we take a lot of, this country is all about educated risks. That's what makes us great.
Did the Ohio and Tennessee Valley industries increase their emissions recap? The emissions that fly over the North Carolina mountains?
Well, all I know is that Rand Paul, or whatever his name is, whom I don't agree with, introduced a bill to reduce the restrictions of the Clean Smokestack Act. And sadly, because I live in Charlotte, one of my U.S. senators voted for it. Your senator, Jim DeMint, also voted, but Lindsey Graham did not. And that's ridiculous. I mean, I was just shocked. But that's some of the overreach that's happening from the right now. So. And there are a lot, and that kind of rule would not have broad-based support among independents and many Republicans. And you start talking about clean air and pollution and all that, you heard my statistics, that's 79–80% of Americans. That will not fly, in my opinion. And people have to pay a price at the polls for that, and that's why there has to be effective business organizations to make them pay a price at the polls, not just environmentalists.
In the wake of that, are other states in the nation ever going to follow California's emissions policy, which is pretty heavy-handed? That would really help it.
I have no way of knowing that question. Is that question? You know, I have a lot of friends of mine who live in California, the left coast, as I call it, and the nice thing about California is they are very innovative. There's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of goods and ideas they come out with, but there are a lot of mistakes. So I don't know. But California has led our nation in a number of key areas, one of which is asbestos. So we'll see what happens. Questions? Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed being here.
So much, Shannon. As predicted, I think we probably all could ask him 1,000 more questions, and maybe we will afterwards, and we'll be able to answer them all. And he's exactly the right person to build the bridges he talked about. I think you should be on the podium more often. I think we need to see you out there saying these things in public. Maybe we'll get him into politics. Anyway, just some quick thank yous. They're very important thank yous, though. First of all, to all the staff of the Library Society. Janice, I see there, who always mans the door and takes care of ticket sales and things. Carol, the librarian, who, among other things, we've had several speakers who've been on a book tour of sorts, and she's organised all of the supply of their books and the mini bookshop at the back of the room. Debbie provides massive support, both Debbies. An extremely key person is Rob, who puts up with my constant phone calls, requests, ideas for the website that have to be done yesterday, and who is very overworked by Wide Angle, so hugely appreciative of Rob. And also Tricia, who every single week, Tricia the archivist, has come up with items from the archive. This is an amazing archive here in the Library Society, which reflect the theme of the week. And I hope that you've all taken advantage of that, and I'm sure there is something in the box today. And so we're really grateful to Trish for enhancing our perspective on each subject we've considered. Principal Ingredient don't like me thanking them every week, but Wide Angle would not be the same at all without the amazing look given to it by Igor Yotsic and his team of branding and designers. So we're extremely grateful to them for supporting us for free. Secondly, L.R. Birchie and Company, who underwrote this series and really covered a lot of our costs and enabled us to turn as much of your ticket price as possible into profits for the Library Society to put into all of the very urgent programs they have going on at the moment, including restoration of long neglected parts of the archive, long neglected parts of the building. There are all sorts of programs that all of your money feeds into, and so we're extremely grateful to you all for being such engaged supporters every week over the last few months, and we hope that you'll continue to come next year and that you'll tell your friends, and we'll continue to grow. So thank you all very much again.